unsportsmanlike conduct.
You're listening to Two for Unsportsmanlike with your hosts, Kevin Wabshall and Ryan Foisey. Kevin and Ryan drop the myths and talk about the latest news, rumors, and games around the NHL.
Welcome back to Two for Unsportsmanlike. I'm Ryan. He's Kevin. We've got a few things to talk through. We missed you last week due to the long weekend, but we're back and ready to talk about some hockey. We're recording this on Sunday afternoon, February 21st. Some big games this weekend. We had two great rivalries last night in the Hockey Night in Canada matchups, Flames versus Oilers, Montreal and Toronto. First thing we want to get into, though, is touch on something that was a follow-up to a story we had on one of our earlier episodes about the Jim Rutherford leaving the Penguins as the general manager. And it looks like now we have Brian Burke coming in to fill the president of hockey operations role, and then Ron Hextall coming in as the general manager. Kevin, what's going on in your mind there?
It's never, ever going to be a dull moment with Brian Burke involved in your organization. He's, he loves his tough guys. He loves his toughness and truculence. I'm sure everyone remembers the speech he gave when he got signed and came in to be the GM of the Leafs about pugnacity, truculence, and so on and so forth. So it's going to be interesting to watch. It kind of raised a few eyebrows. I don't think a lot of people expected Berkey to get back into that. But I guess him not being the GM is not going to be as big of a deal. Him and Hextall, though, I'm expecting there's probably going to be some turnover, especially with those two at the helm in Pittsburgh. Berkey's always been entertaining, to say the least. But it'll be fun to see what they can kind of do to maybe try and right the ship a little bit in Pittsburgh. Because, we talked about how we, at least in our opinions, don't really see another cup as something that's possible, maybe with Crosby's career coming down to a close. But the other flip side is if they can maybe flip it around and take another couple runs, it'll be an interesting thing to see, because Brian Burke's not a huge fan of the full rebuilds, and it's going to be fun to watch. Berkey's always brought a certain level of fun to the sport, and I respect the guy. So it'll be an interesting situation for them. I like Brian Burke as a hockey man. I think he's got a couple takes that are a little outdated in today's day and age in the NHL, but he's going to hopefully bring some positive changes to Pittsburgh.
I always see Brian Burke as rough on the outside, but truly a sweetheart on the inside. I think he's actually a really great person. The Sportsnet segment, which was his last segment with the show, where he was absolutely roasted by the panel, was so much fun to watch. But the guys love him. Your friends truly love you, and they like to also tear into you a little bit and can give you jabs here and there, but the love's still there. Ron Hextall is an interesting one for me. One surprised me a little bit more. He did get his fair share of criticism when he was with the Flyers, and then to go over to the state rival in Pittsburgh it's an interesting play for sure. But obviously Pittsburgh and Brian Burke saw something in him that from his previous tenure with the Flyers, that there's something there that they can do something right away, and then also something in the future. Brian Burke, in his first interview or conference, once his position was officially announced with the organization, was saying they were in a win now mode. So they are still in a Stanley Cup now mode. They do want to get the most out of their remaining stars' careers. I look at not just Crosby, but Malkin, Letang, who have a few aging stars on that team. And I still think they might have what it takes to get to a Stanley Cup, but it's going to be, they're not a favorite anymore by any means.
No. Well, I don't think Ron Hextall gets the job in Pittsburgh if they don't also bring in Brian Burke. Like, I almost see it as like another guy that's going to have to sign off on any trade, just because Hextall's made some interesting decisions, I'll say, in the past, just with his moves as a GM. I don't think he would have got hired, maybe, unless they were also bringing in Berkey. I'm kind of that opinion.
I don't think you're wrong there, Kevin. So looking forward to see what the Penguins are going to do. But let's get a little bit more local with our topic, and we're going back to last night. And last night we had the Calgary Flames versus the Edmonton Oilers, the Battle of Alberta, and what is usually a
It's not a
very
good night for
close
you.
rivalry. Yeah, not a great night for me as a Flames fan.
Oh,
Edmonton absolutely wiping the floor in the second game of a back-to-back against Calgary. 7-1 the final score on Saturday night. Connor McDavid, 5 points, 3 goals, 2 assists. Nothing going the Flames' way. Some pretty, you could say, questionable goals going by Markstrom, but I can give him the benefit of the doubt because he's been elite up to this point and has been the workhorse goalie for the better part of the season. However, for the Flames just seem soft, and that's the first comment I'll make about them. I am going to go down a rabbit hole of a few different things, but we go back a few weeks ago when they had the players only meeting, and Tkachuk called the team out for being too soft and was told by whoever it might be, someone else in the room, to calm it down. And really, I think that's a poor message to send. Tkachuk is one of the few players on that team that gives his heart and soul most nights.
yeah.
And you can tell since that players only meeting that he hasn't been the same. And he hasn't been able to do the things that he would normally make him successful in those games. But there's a lot of sharing of blame to go about why this team is not succeeding and hasn't succeeded for a very long time. Kevin, maybe I'll go to you first because I think I'm going to need at least a 10-minute wall in this segment where I'm going to get absolutely I've got a lot of things to go into, so I'm just going to hand it over to you first.
Well, I can't. You know what? The first person I'm not going to give any blame to is Jacob Markstrom. You know what? Yeah, maybe he could have saved a couple of those goals last night, but man, how much do you need to rely on the guy? Like the amount of the Flames outshot the Oilers for the better part of the game, if not the whole game, and Markstrom made his fair share of saves, but like the goals that did go by him were a lot of grade A chances, or they were coming off of 97 stick, which is like, okay, that's fair. Like one takeaway that I'll get at is it's insane how good Connor McDavid is. He's got 37 points. Like he just completely took the game over by himself last night.
Connor McDavid's on pace for an over 100-point season or over 100 points this season in a 56-game season.
Yeah, 104 is what he's on pace for right now. I took a look. I'm honestly kind of curious if he watched the Toronto game, saw Matthews and Marner inch a little closer to him, and then just decided to take over.
My favorite meme that I saw on Twitter was the McDavid. The conversation had opened up about Matthews and Marner inching closer to that kind of Art Ross MVP kind of role within the league, and then McDavid. I took that personally.
Yeah, oh yeah, that's a good meme. I like that one.
Took a good leap back in the front of that race for sure.
Well, we'll get to the rest of those guys later because like the talent level is kind of nuts right now. Like you've got so many guys on pace for like 80 or 90 points in 56 games, but we'll get to that. One takeaway from the Flames is it is true. Tkachuk has looked actually pretty awful since that players only meeting. Ever since he got really mad at the guys for the puck being flipped at him incident and no one really coming to aid him, regardless of how you feel about that or what side of that coin you fall on, whether you think it's a big deal or not, he clearly did. And he felt like his teammates could have had his back. And I look around the league and I see a lot of teams that have like a really tight room. Like Pittsburgh's room, like Crosby and Malkin and all of them are really tight. Toronto's room with all those kids and like they're always bringing in some old San Jose Shark player. They're a really tight group though. I don't get that feeling from the Flames. I don't think this is a tight group. I don't think this is a group that's really going out there every night going, you know, we've got each other's back. We got to do what we can to win for each other. And that's a huge, like, they don't have a room. The culture in that room seems like, from an outsider, obviously, seems pretty poor. And the blame can go anywhere from the top to the bottom. I think Gaudreau's been fine this year, but Monahan has been horrible this season. I don't think Elias Lindholm's a number one center. I think I prefer him on the wing. Matthew Tkachuk has been missing the most important, arguably, elements of his game for a couple weeks now. The defense, Tanev and Hanifin have been really good. Valimaki has looked like a rookie or a defenseman who's missed a lot of time and has missed development time, and it shows. Gio's starting to show his age. Rasmus Anderson's been okay, but like Jacob Markstrom has carried them to where they are. This team has no heart. Well, they did have heart, but they decided to bench it. And Sam Bennett, they don't have heart. They don't have grit. They're not fighting back. They're built to be this tough to play against team, and they just aren't. You watched Edmonton last night, and it was sad watching the Flames' effort last night because they were getting shots, but none of them were anything that would. It was just
perimeter
numbers.
shots are in the crest.
Yeah,
every time.
It was all numbers. Just a large shot number, but quality scoring chances very, very few.
Yeah.
Like Koskinen didn't steal that game. He made a lot of saves because there was a lot of easy saves to make.
I think that's a fair point. All right, taking a deep breath, and I'm going to go in here. So
Yeah,
I have a lot.
buddy.
So I've been a Calgary resident my entire life, 29 years, and I've been a Flames fan for the better part of 2 decades. I kind of jumped on the whole hockey thing as the Flames were going on their 03-04 run. And since that year, the Flames have done nothing but be mediocre. Nothing. They've done nothing exceptional. They really, since that argument can even be made since the 80s, with the exception of 2004, they haven't done anything exceptional. And so I start at the very top, actually, and I look at Murray Edwards. And I look at him and I say, as the owner, what is your goal with this team? Is it to just be profitable and be happy with that? Or do you actually want to win a Stanley Cup? And I know every owner in a press conference will say our goal is to win a Stanley Cup, but I don't necessarily know how true that is every time. Depends on the market, depends on the owner. Then it goes to the GM. Okay, if your goal is to win a Stanley Cup, you need to give your GM the opportunity to do the things that he needs to do in order to get a Stanley Cup caliber team. So there's 2 things in that. Get the players that are skilled enough to go far in the playoffs, and get a coach that understands the game well enough that he can utilize and get the most out of his players. And Calgary's done neither of those things. So I look at maybe a little bit of the blame is with Brad Treliving as well. I mean, through his trades, I think he's done all right. Free agent signings, hit or miss. But in terms of actually acquiring star talent and a coach that is even just NHL caliber, has been, neither of those have come through. And
No,
so
Jeff Ward's not a
Jeff
NHL
Ward,
coach.
I disagreed with the decision to make him an interim coach. I thought he was good out of the gate because I thought they were riding off of momentum of Bill Peters being canned, to be quite honest. And then once that momentum died out, I think the errors in Jeff Ward's ways started to show by the end of last season. And so I wasn't very happy with the actual removing of the interim title and making him the head coach. I think they took the easy way out. I thought that was a poor choice. The other side of that is, well, for the longest time, Calgary hasn't had an elite coach, or what you might be able to call an elite coach. And I go back to Daryl Sutter, who we pretty much fluked into, but who would maybe be like the only coach you could say was an elite caliber coach. And then that also took a step back when he was also taking on the general manager duties at the same time.
You can't do both.
You can't do both. And so
no, it's too hard.
I look at every coach that has come through since then, and especially in recent years, Bob Hartley, Bill Peters. Bob Hartley might have a Stanley Cup over like 2 decades ago now, but that style of play has changed, and coaches, you'll see that, like, one thing that's important to note here is elite coaches from 20 years ago often can't be elite coaches today because of how the game changes. I'm sure as a Toronto Maple Leafs fan, you're familiar with Mike Babcock. And
yeah.
And so I look at the coaching. Coaching's also a miss. Now I look at the players, and this is actually one that's starting to pop up, a discussion that's popped up a few times lately, is the leadership. And so I thought, I'm not sure which one I want to go with here, but at least for the early part of what we'll say his most recent contract is, Mark Giordano has been a good captain. He's been one of the best defensemen on the team up until his Norris season 2 seasons ago. And it's very inspirational as a non-drafted player who has spent time across seas, who has had to battle his way to get into the lineup, to work his way all the way up to the top place in the lineup. And he undeniably, at a duration in time, was the number one defenseman on the Calgary Flames. You couldn't take that away from him. And he was also the best leader on the Flames. I also remember the story of when Jarome Iginla left as the captain. Jarome, one of his symbolic things that resembled how a good team functioned was he had a bunch of pencils that he kept in his stall in the locker room that were wrapped with elastics. And he said, one pencil, you take it out, it's easy to break, but all of these together, a team that works together, you can't break them. And when Jarome Iginla left, the Calgary Flames took that bundle of pencils and put it in Mark Giordano's stall. And that's how you knew that the team had actually picked him as the designated captain.
Yeah.
Giordano has been a player that's led by example and by work ethic. And I think that's starting to fail now that he's declining due to age. I think it's more difficult for players. I don't think that Giordano's not working hard. I just think it's more challenging for him as a player to be able to compete at the level that's needed every night. And that's just due to age. That's nothing that's really within his control entirely.
I don't know if it's just age on that one. I think it's age, and his supporting cast just continues to get worse. You know what I mean? Like, he lost his best defense partner he's ever had on the offseason. They were the best defense pair in the league, arguably, for a number of years. It's a bit of both. Age, supporting cast isn't pulling their weight, and it's hard to lead. You can lead a horse to water, but you can't make him drink. And I'm not going to say anything poor about Mark Giordano, because he, by all accounts, has been a fantastic leader. Amazing defenseman, seems like a good person and a quality guy in the room. But there just seems to be too much of the other end of that going on, where it's just like they're nonchalant. They don't care. And I really feel bad for Gio.
I do feel bad
really
for him. I don't place any blame on him, but I'm not sure how much longer he can don the C4 on that team at the same time.
I don't like stripping that. Stripping captaincy. The last time I saw that happen was Thornton, wasn't it? In San Jose?
Yeah.
That's the last time I can remember it. I don't know. I don't like stripping of the C. I think it can't all fall on the captain to be a leader on the team. It's one thing that there's a lot of bad Toronto media that's saying kind of the same sort of things about John Tavares right now. It's like, is he a good leader? This, that, and the other thing. He hasn't looked, like a superstar this year, or however they're painting him. But it's not all on the captain. And that's one thing that I have really learned more as I've grown up and saw that is it can't all be on the captain. It was the same thing with, like, Jarome got a lot of criticism for a lot of years for the failing of the Flames, when really you look at the team, you're like, okay, well, Jarome Iginla and his cast of third and fourth liners, they can only do so much. Same thing with Sundin in Toronto. Daniel Alfredson got his fair share of it in Ottawa. A lot of just criticisms, and, like, it just doesn't make sense. So I agree with you that I don't know how much longer he's going to be doing that Steve, but only because I don't know how much longer he's either going to be playing or on the Flames.
Yep, fair points to make. The other side to that is just from what are supposed to be the star players on the Flames, Gaudreau, Monahan, the buy-in is not showing at all. Gaudreau is having a bounce-back season, I'll give you that. He's actually looked pretty good on the offensive side of the puck. But I don't see him as the player that's engaged to the point where he's actually rallying the team around him. I think he does have his moments where he has amazing individualistic efforts. And I don't know, maybe it's not his job to rally the troops, but I think as a star player and a player that draws a lot of attention on your team, especially a lot of people consider Johnny Gaudreau a franchise player for the Flames, what is he doing to bring the team together So I don't see him fulfilling a necessary leadership role in that team, even though he's not a captain. He needs to be able to fill some of that. And then I would expect the same from Monahan as well. Monahan at one point was being groomed for the captaincy of this team. You knew it because he was at all of the drafts. He was at all of the events where a leader is needed, right next to Gio. And you could tell that the organization was prepping him to take over that role once Gio would be succeeded as a captain. And I'm not confident that Sean Monahan is the next captain of the Calgary Flames. I don't even know if Sean Monahan's going to be around within the next 1 or 2 years in the Calgary Flames.
No. Like, as it stands right now, the argument, I would say, is probably leaning 19 there, no?
If it was today, yeah, I think Tkachuk is the captain of this team.
Gun to my head, next captain of the Flames will be Matthew Tkachuk.
The only thing that takes away from Tkachuk's end is the little kind of questionable things that he gets into, the antics. But
yeah, I mean,
I still don't know if there's a player that actually emphasizes effort and leadership more than Tkachuk on that team still, and actually is engaged enough that he wants to win. And I actually feel, as a Flames fan, it kind of terrifies me a bit, because if the rest of the team isn't buying into the level that Tkachuk is engaging in, is he going to want to stay around? I mean, he's not a Canadian. He's not a Canadian player. He doesn't really have anything rooted in Calgary. Is he going to want to go back to the U.S., play where his dad played? Like, I think the only thing that
play with his brother.
Yeah.
Like, as silly as that sounds, though, like, you're absolutely correct. Why would you stay in a situation where you feel like you're the only guy who cares even remotely? Because I would argue the only one single player on the Flames that I would call a star player at all this season, not overall, just this current season, is Jacob Markstrom.
Yep.
Johnny Gaudreau's playing really good one-way offense, but Johnny Gaudreau is Johnny Gaudreau. And to kind of further your point just on him quick, not every player is good at everything. I bring the Phil Kessel thing up because there's a lot of similarities in the two. He's not a leader. He's not a centerpiece. He's a supporting piece. The problem is the Flames have always tried to view him as the centerpiece, and he's not. That's not him. Really good player. Can add a lot to your lineup on any contending team. But I'm not sure he's the guy you want around to be the example for the kids. I mean, mind you, the Flames would have to start drafting actual prospects at some point, but he's not really a guy you want around to show the kids how it's done, if that makes sense. Not a slight against Gaudreau. I don't think he's not a professional guy by any means, but he's just not really what you think of when you think of the example. Like Gio, prime Gio, 100% what you want. Flip side is Tkachuk that? Do you want your kids to watch this guy and go, oh yeah, I can run guys and slew foot people and slash people all I want and, you know, get under everyone's skin? And it's like, that play style is sort of effective sometimes, but it can backfire. So it's kind of like the only reason Tkachuk would be captain in my eyes is because who else really?
Yeah, you're not wrong there. There's not a lot of candidates. I would say the only one I could ever maybe put into that conversation if he was a bit younger would be Michael Backlund, just because of how he has. Well, he's a Flames grown prospect, and I think that gives him a lot of benefit. And he's been with the team, and he's been part of the core of the team for so long. I think, and he's been probably their best defensive center over the last decade.
Easily.
I think that would earn him a shot, but you don't really see from him. He's not one of the more engaged players in terms of like rallying troops, things like that. I think like undeniably a great player, but not typically the role he fills.
No, it's a consistently good effort usually, but yeah, I don't really see captain when I see Backlund.
The other side of it is I look at the other teams that are at the bottom of the standings in the North Division, and even the worst teams have that star player, and the Flames don't. And so if you don't have a star player, you have to have really good depth. So I think of the Montreal Canadiens. Montreal Canadiens don't have a star forward that's going to go score them 50 goals or 40 goals even in an 80-game season, but they have probably one of the best bottom sixes out of any team in the North Division.
And a crazy deep forward lineup. Just crazy deep. Like,
yeah.
Toffoli and Anderson have been huge for them.
The Flames don't have a star, and they probably arguably have one of the worst bottom sixes in the North Division. That's a huge problem because even a team like Ottawa has a guy like Thomas Chabot or Brady Tkachuk to rally around. Even a team like Vancouver, who has arguably the worst defense in the North Division and is the second worst team in the North Division right now, has Elias Pettersson, has Brock Besser, Quinn Hughes, guys that are either already stars or up-and-coming stars to rally around. And the Flames don't have that. They have Sean Monahan and Johnny Gaudreau on the back half of their prime. And the way things are going, they're not going to be a competitor within the Sean Monahan and Johnny Gaudreau window. It's just not going to happen.
I think it's closed. I think the window's closed. I hate writing teams off, but like, look at the Flames prospect list. Just go look at it and tell me what in there has you excited.
Nothing.
Hopefully, third line center Connor Zary.
Yep.
That's it. Their best prospect was probably Valimaki.
Yep. And I think Valimaki is going to turn out great. I think he's going to be a good defenseman. He's got a lot of learning to do, but I think he's going to be a good defenseman. I think
he'll be a good top 4 defenseman. I am confident in saying that.
I think he's weighted by Nestorov a bit. I do not like Nestorov. Oh boy,
he's pretty bad. He's just like,
does he do anything other than try and one-timer the puck? He's like, and don't be offended, he is a worse Dion Phaneuf. He literally just tries to one-time the puck whenever it comes within like a 5-foot radius of him. Except his misses are even worse than Phaneuf's were. His misses are 7 feet high and wide of the net, not even within like a tipping range. And then the puck's just turned over and the opponent's skating back the other way.
Yeah, I never understood how Dion got so much worse at that as he got like slightly into his prime. He was so awesome at the one-timer for like the first 3 years, and then it just fell off, and it just doesn't make sense. But that's actually a pretty solid comparison. It's just like a guy who probably, if he played in the NHL when clutch and grab was a thing, he'd probably be okay. But yeah, for him to be playing over like Shillington is just such a head scratcher for me, and I don't understand it. But I mean, there's a lot of things on that team I don't understand. Like ownership, like Brad Treliving is a bad GM and he's good at trades. I'll give him that. His trades that he's made, fine. They're good. I'll give him all the credit in the world for those. And then you go and look at his drafts. I don't know if it's him or if it's the scouting in Calgary, but holy, they are not a good drafting team.
No. I'm thinking back about it, and really since the Tkachuk year, there's nothing coming. The
Valimaki was the year after Tkachuk, 2017. They traded the first, second, and third round picks in 2018. Their first round pick in 2019 was Jacob Pelletier, it's too early to call that. And then Connor Zary last year. But like before that, Rasmus Anderson and Shillington were second round picks. They didn't have a first round pick in 2015. 2014, obviously fourth overall, they picked Bennett. Not a single other player they've picked in that draft played. 2013, one player that they picked that plays in the NHL, Sean Monahan. 2012, 2 players, Brett Kulak and Mark Jankowski. So it's bad drafting. It's bad drafting, and if you can usually get over not as good drafting with a good development system, and they just don't seem to have that either.
I think he got the benefit of the doubt with drafting because right before he came in, we were drafting players like Hunter Smith.
Yeah.
And that is Ooh,
Eric
I know we were
Nystrom.
talking about Berkey earlier. We know that's a Berkey type player, but oh boy, if we could go
Oh
back and
God, don't get
retake
me
that
started
pick.
on Brian. Don't get me started on Brian Burke's draft picks. I love Brian Burke. Don't let him run your draft table.
Yeah.
I think the only good player he drafted for the Leafs was Morgan Riley. Like, ugh.
So I want to make one final point here on the Flames, and this is what I would argue is a big component of what keeps them in this phase of mediocrity, which they've been in for 15 years since that 04 run, or
Yeah.
well, including the lockout seasons there. But the whenever an elite talent becomes available, or whenever they want to make or pursue like a top player, I go back to when Mark Stone was on the trade block before he went to the Vegas Golden Knights, and Calgary was rumored, as many other teams were, to be in those conversations. But
I was convinced he was coming here.
I wasn't actually, and the reason why I wasn't is because how often has Calgary ever actually got that number one kind of person on the trade block in the last 20 years? It's really never. And you think of that, and there's a few reasons. I think that's failure from ownership, from giving the GM the ability to actually, failure from the ownership to actually attract star players to the market. That's not on the GM. GM can only do so much. That's on the ownership to actually demonstrate that this team wants to win a Stanley Cup, that you're going to enjoy your time here, and that this is where players want to play. That's on ownership. It's on the GM to actually do a good job of negotiating the deal to try and get the star player to over once he's been attracted.
Yeah.
And that's failed time and time again. Every time a star player comes on the market, Flames, yeah, they'll be rumored to be in the conversation, because it's not, I don't imagine it's the hardest thing in the world to pick up a phone and tell a GM you're interested in their player. But to actually have the player interested in coming there, have a market that's attractive, and then have the GM actually win out on a deal, that's where the challenge is. And Calgary's failed at that time and time again. And because of that, they've never got that player to push them over the top, to actually have them be considered a true contender. I think that we got that little bit of a mirage when when the Flames won the actual Western Conference a few years ago, and then knocked out in 5 games by the Avalanche right after that. It's only going to continue. If there's not an organizational shift, you can't just fire Ward and get a new coach and expect things to change. You can't just hold a players' only meeting, expect things to change. There has to be a real organizational shift within the Calgary Flames if you ever want to escape mediocrity. I think I saw that happen with the Maple Leafs, because they were in kind of a low point for a long time, leading up to probably the end of that would have been with Lou Lamoriello. And I saw a shift happen within the Maple Leafs, that they actually didn't want to just fill their seats. They wanted to win a cup.
And they're an attractive place to play now.
Absolutely.
They overhauled the culture. Like that's actually the fantastic point is the Flames need a culture shift so bad. They need to overhaul it. Because if I'm a free agent sitting there right now, and if I'm a Mark Stone, say, going to UFA, and I'm looking at my options, it's like I could go play in Calgary, where they are literally doing the definition of insanity. Every year it's the same thing. And every year in the offseason, all of us are all talking, oh, this is the year they get rid of Gaudreau and Monahan and rebuild. This is the year they blow it up. This is the year that. You're sounding like the Leafs with this is the year we finally win a cup. Like, at least Toronto's building to something. They're putting together this culture and this team that, by all accounts, should at some point challenge for and hopefully win a Stanley Cup. Calgary's not putting together a contending team. They're not even building a playoff team.
And so when that happens, you have two types of free agents. You have a free agent that wants a payday, and you have a free agent that wants a cup. And they're attracting the free agents that want a payday, because Brad Treliving's handing out $5.5 million contracts to James Neal so he can come score 10 goals and then get traded away for Milan Lucic a season later. That is the type of free agency that's being attracted to the Calgary Flames. Players that have...
Was that Neal's contract?
I think it was something like 5 or 5.5. Brutal. And yeah, it's players that have had some successful seasons in the past, have proved they know how to play, but ultimately maybe they've already won a cup, or maybe they just really don't care and they just want get a nice juicy contract to ride out for a few seasons, get paid, and then go off into the mirage, the distance, into the sunset, and go sip pina coladas on a beach in Florida.
Yeah. If I'm Johnny Gaudreau, I'm looking at this as soon as my contract's up, I'm getting out of here.
I don't think he's a Calgary Flame in 2 years from now. His contract's
100%.
up at the end of next year. And
yes,
if the Flames are not competitive, he's traded before the deadline. If the Flames are kind of in that ballpark, then maybe they get to the end of it and maybe he walks to the end. I still think he ends up in that area of where he grew up in the...
he will be playing in the northeastern United States by 2 years from now.
Boston,
100%.
Philly, New Jersey, New York, somewhere around there. He will be playing.
Somewhere in there.
He'll be in the Metropolitan.
The Rangers could be a sneaky pick for him. A couple of years from now, they're actually going to be looking pretty scary. They can throw a little bit of money at Gaudreau, put him on there, ride him out as your second line left wing with Panarin on the top line. That'd be a good situation for him. If you're listening, Johnny, that'd be a good call.
If only he was. I'm sure he wouldn't have loved a lot of the stuff we set up to this point, though. Well,
I don't blame him, though. Like, it's like when the newspapers attacked people like Phil Kessel. Like I always go back to that because that is like the perfect comparable for Johnny Gaudreau. Super talented offensive hockey player who's being expected to do more than what he is. Gaudreau is what he is. He's given a lot of really good years to the Calgary Flames. He's had some elite seasons. He had a 99-point season here. He's brought a lot of people out of their seats, and he, at this point, owes the Flames absolutely nothing more. He is what he is. He's around a point per game, offensive, small left winger who is never going to be physical because he's like 5'7". That's just not his game. What he's good at, he's elite at. But the expectation in this city, and I think it has something to do with our last star player was Jerome, so we want everyone to be like Jerome, but not everyone is good at everything. And Johnny Gaudreau's given the city a lot of good years, and he was like a 4th-round pick. Good for him. He owes Calgary absolutely nothing more. He's doing what he can with what he's surrounded with. If you had given Gaudreau an elite center to play with, he would have had a couple 100-point seasons. Like, I'm not faulting Johnny Gaudreau at all. I'd fault Monahan long before I'd fault Johnny Gaudreau, because Monahan, coming out of junior, was lauded as a really good two-way center, and he's just not. So I don't know. I don't think the blame falls to Gaudreau. I don't think the blame falls to Tkachuk. It's you nailed it with ownership. It's how many coaches does Brad Treliving get before he is gone? Because he clearly doesn't seem to know what his blueprint is going to look like. Or if he does and he's not being given, the full autonomy to actually make the decisions, there's that too. But there's a lot that needs to be fixed in Calgary.
Yeah. We're going to see. We'll probably come back to this topic in a week or two. We'll see how the Flames respond to their 7-1 loss to Edmonton. They don't get any easier with their matchup tomorrow. They play the Toronto Maple Leafs. And so that'll be a tough team to bounce back against. But if they might be able to rally and get a win
against... Is it tomorrow night?
Yeah, tomorrow, Calgary and Toronto. If they're able to bounce back and get a win against the top team in the division, maybe that helps rally the troops a little bit. But if they take another loss to make it, I believe now 4 consecutive losses, what it would be if they lose to Toronto tomorrow night. They are coming back from a place of like you're not coming back. There's no coming back from.
Well, Is it 2 games this week? Monday, Wednesday against Toronto? Or is it
I think
3?
they go into Ottawa right after Toronto. I'll have to double check the
Well,
schedule.
I think I'm pretty sure Wednesday they're also, because Toronto's got Edmonton on Saturday. So I don't know. That's going to be tough for the Flames. They're going to have to bounce back, but they're going to have to try and bounce back against the team in the division that everyone said would be really dangerous if they find their footing. Who has found their footing?
Yep.
Like, they're scoring a ton. So that's
So you're right. We got
Calgary,
Toronto,
yikes.
Monday, Wednesday, and then Calgary, Ottawa on Thursday in the back-to-back after that match against Toronto on Wednesday.
Calgary could go into this on Saturday with 6 straight losses. Like, realistically, like, objectively speaking, and not just as a fan of the Leafs, you just look at it on paper, Calgary could very easily walk through this week with going 0 for 2 against them. The way they're playing, they don't have a hope. They have to turn it around.
All right, Kevin, let's talk about the Flames when we get together in a week or 2 from now and see how they bounce back against this loss. But we have a couple other things we want to chat about before the end of our show today. I want to talk about another game that actually happened last night over the span of, what was it, like 11 hours? We talked about
12 hours or something.
the Lake Tahoe game. So we had the Colorado Avalanche and their beautiful Quebec Nordique jerseys.
Oh, beautiful jerseys.
Versus the Golden Knights and, in my opinion, the questionable red jerseys of the Vegas Golden Knights.
Those
at least
they're better than the gold ones.
They're better than the gold ones, and at least they weren't wearing the gold chrome helmets. That was not a fan of those either. I think it's just too gimmicky.
I don't think they're going away though.
And I understand that a lot of what Vegas does is gimmicky, and that is very much a Vegas type branding. But oh boy. Anyway, so we have these 2 teams. They're in the top 3 of the West Division, and 2 good teams. The game was delayed because the sunlight and the temperatures were too warm. The ice was getting beat up in the first period, so they decided to play the remaining 2 periods in the evening when things cooled down. I think it was still a great game. I did miss the first portion, but the scenery was absolutely beautiful. You had the mountains there in the background in Colorado, just unbelievable view. And then the evening, I was able to catch the remainder of the game as it was on quite late, and I decided to tune out of Calgary and Edmonton. It was a very close game. It was very much the Nathan MacKinnon show through some points of that game. He did take over at certain points. I think one of a lot of people's favorite highlights was Nathan MacKinnon's goal with the Alex Pietrangelo oh boy on the mic.
Oh boy. So good.
Yeah.
Because really,
I mean, if you're going one-on-one with, if you see a Nathan MacKinnon with wheels coming at you, I think any defenseman, and Pietrangelo is one of the best in the league, and I think any defenseman will go, oh boy, if they see that coming at them.
Yeah. Well, did you see video of the ice before they, or like right when they stopped it?
Yeah,
it was
a little bit of it.
It was slush, man. Like they were right to stop it. That would have got real dangerous for the players. I like the outdoor games if they would do them like once every 3 years. There's too many. There's too many outdoor games. Chicago's played outside like 6 times. Like there's too many. It's a cool gimmick, and again, it goes back to gimmicks, and it is neat, but there's so many of them now where you're kind of just like, yeah, it's the yearly outdoor game. It's like the All-Star game. I haven't watched a full NHL All-Star game in, honestly, probably since the one where the year after Phil Kessel got drafted last.
Oh yeah.
Probably. Like I think the last time I watched the game was the next one after that, when they sent like Lupulfunov and Kessel. So it was years ago now. I don't know. They're cool. Like the scenery was absolutely stunning, like unbelievably gorgeous views, but just couldn't get the weather to cooperate. And
well, I mean, as much as we like to say we like them or not, they make money because these, like obviously the Lake Tahoe game, no fans in attendance because of COVID, but the games previous where they've been held in football stadiums or baseball stadiums with 60,000 fans attending. Obviously, they're making a pretty penny off of these games.
Oh yeah, it's a
and the
pure cash
viewership
grab,
is
100%.
the viewership is usually those games are significantly higher in viewership than any other regular season game. And so
And special jerseys and stuff too, which are always cool.
Yep.
It's always fun to watch that. So
I do think that they had some years in the kind of like the later 2010s where it was 5 or 6 outdoor games in a season, and that is just whoa.
yeah,
But I do think
every year was the Blackhawks.
One a season would be I'd be fine with that.
Yeah, like that'd be all right. I still think if we took a couple years off, it wouldn't be the worst thing in the world. But again, you're right. The dollar sign factor there is probably not going to let that happen. But it felt like we were getting 4 or 5 a year. The Blackhawks played in every single season. They were in an outdoor game because they were just the cash cow for a while. But I don't know. Yeah, I think I could live with 1 a year, I guess. But I'd prefer to maybe take a couple of years off. But people like it. Everyone's got their own opinion on that, and now it's not really a big deal.
I did say it was the McKinnon show in that game, but there's another player that I like to keep my eye on when I watch Colorado, and Cale Makar. He had another highlight reel play. It wasn't a play that scored a goal, but a play where he moved laterally across the blue line again. And I go back to Ryan Whitney on the Spit and Chicklets podcast, and I listened to what he said. And he said he can actually pick up speed moving laterally, which is damn near impossible for any NHL skater. Never mind like elite defenseman. I've still never seen a defenseman with that type of skating ability and the ability to also control the puck. I do think that in his sophomore season, he is the best defenseman in the NHL. I would be happy to make that argument. I don't even think
it's close.
And they have Bowen Byram coming up, who's going to make a case to be the second best defenseman in the NHL.
He's going to be really good. That is going to be is Byram a lefty? He is, right?
I believe so.
Yes. Yeah. So that's going to be the best defense player in the NHL for probably 10 years. That's insane. Cale Makar, and we can kind of touch on him a little more when we hit the next era thing. He is insane. He's the best defenseman in the league. Like you watch him, he defends well. Like his defensive ability is there. He's like, there was a lot of argument in the rookie year about Quinn Hughes versus Makar, and I didn't actually watch a ton of honestly either of them, just highlights and stuff. Being able to see Hughes a little more this year, you can kind of see it, but I've been able to catch a little bit of Makar as well. I've watched a few Avs games, and man, that kid he's so special. He has a chance to be the best defenseman we've seen since Lidstrom.
Yeah, I would agree with that. And probably the most mobile defenseman that ever has been seen.
Ever.
And we see a lot of defensemen that can skate fast and like to jump into the rush, but it's not just skating fast. He is all over the ice. You cannot. If Cale Makar wants to catch you, he is going to catch you. I've seen him come.
Edge work.
Yeah, he can just pick up speed and go any direction at any time, and it just blows my mind. And you have NHL players, former NHL players, commenting on how they can't comprehend with their own minds how a player can move their body that way.
Like I would never say he's as fast, but he's probably a better skater than McDavid.
I could make that argument too. I think
that I could argue that
in one direction McDavid will beat anybody in a foot race. The only person that's going to come close in a one directional skate race is Dylan Larkin. Other than that,
yeah, he's fast.
Other than that, to be as agile a player, I don't think there's anybody even in the ballpark of Cale Makar.
No. They're definitely, the Avs are spoiled, and my buddy Ryan, he's a huge Avs fan, so he's real lucky to get to have this kid. They've got a really good team building down there in Denver. So with McKinnon, who, top 5 player in the world, depending on where you rank him. Some people have him as 1 or 2. Like he's sensational. The wingers have been incredible. Rantanen's really good. Gabriel Landeskog's been a good player there, good leader. just a special team. Nazem Kadri's fit in really well there. Burakovsky's been good. The whole team just built top to bottom is a really good hockey team.
Yeah, absolutely agree with that. Well, let's talk about a player that has been, I would say, undisputably the best player in the NHL over our lifetimes, though. And let's talk about Sidney Crosby. Played his 1,000th game this weekend. A nice tribute from the team. They all wore 87 jerseys and did the same warm-up that Crosby usually partakes in. Great to see. Again, I really don't think there's been a better player that we've witnessed in recent decades play the game. He's absolutely a generational talent. He is often compared to Alex Ovechkin because they were drafted in subsequent years. And although most will argue that Ovechkin was the better pure goal scorer, the other side of it is Crosby was just the better overall player. His vision, his defensive ability, his ability to play make was bar none through the league for a decade plus.
Well, he's got almost the same amount of points as Ovechkin in like at least a couple hundred less games with the injuries and stuff time he's missed. So I think it's like 1,000 now, and I think Ovechkin's at 1,200 games or like 1,100 and something. So like a couple hundred games less ish. I'm wearing a Crosby jersey actually right now. Like I'm rocking it for his 1,000th game. I've always really liked Sidney Crosby, one of my favorite players to watch, and we've had the treat. We've seen his whole career. From the second he stepped into the NHL, you just knew this guy was going to be special. And it's like we hadn't seen that again until Connor, but man, like just the things he's accomplished, and he's 33. He's still got tons left in the tank. The stuff that Crosby's accomplished so far is incredible. The cups, the gold, the world championships, the world juniors, like the scoring titles. He won the Rocket twice, which is something that a lot of people don't actually seem to remember. He's won the goal scoring title twice. He's amazing. Sidney Crosby is anything he wanted to do, he just did. You watched him, and every time he touched the puck, you knew exactly who had the puck. Like they said it on Hockey Night in Canada last night, and there was a really good point was Sidney Crosby was a guy where you didn't need his name or number on a jersey. You just knew when he had the puck. You didn't need to see 87. You just knew it was him because he just stands out when he's on the ice more than any other player until 97 came along. Now it's kind of like, oh yeah, he stands out pretty good too, but just incredible hockey player, the consummate professional. He's gone through some down years here in Pittsburgh, but he's won them 3 cups now, so pretty good. I'm a big Crosby fan. I liked the argument they were making last night. They said top 5 player of all time. It's a hard argument to make, but I actually think I probably would have him in my top 5. Like, obviously, Gretzky, Lemieux, and Orr. But after that, I mean, it's kind of hard not to put Sid up there now. Like, he's got almost 1,300 points in 1,000 games. He's battled through injuries, but the accomplishments and the accolades, and he's lived up to every single bit of hype he ever had. That's not something that a lot of people can say. So
that's
huge congrats.
Yeah, it's a big milestone for him. In my opinion, he's been the best player of our lifetimes to play in the NHL. Mm-hmm. I'll admit that I was one of the ones, and in Crosby's early career, the most often the insult that he would get is that he was a baby, that he kind of whined about this on the ice. And whether you think that's true or not, that was literally the only thing you could criticize Crosby for, because every other part of his game was elite in every way possible. And I had my moment. So as someone who is part of that Crosby is a baby crowd for a while, I'll admit, to me, it was more because I was just jealous that another team had the best player in the league. Mm-hmm. And I had a moment where in 2010 during the Vancouver Olympics, the gold medal game, I was watching the gold medal game with my family, and I said, if Crosby scores the overtime winner, I will renounce all of the bad things I've said about Crosby, and I will admit he is the best player. And sure enough, puck's off the
Sure
again the
enough.
stick on Crosby's stick through Ryan Miller's 5-hole, and they've got a gold medal. And I'm eating my words.
He just has this way of showing up when you need him to. Sidney, like, obviously he's not the 120-point Crosby he was before. But when you need the guy to show up and produce a goal or a huge assist or just a crazy sequence, you don't bet against 87. It's just not something you do. He's so special. And again, now the golden goal, one of a couple play calls in my life that like full goosebumps. Bautista's bat flip against the Texas Rangers. Goosebumps. Crosby's golden goal, Eberle's goal against Russia, 5 seconds left in the World Juniors. Like those are all goals that, goosebumps. Oh my God, yes, right? So Crosby's given us a lot of like amazing highlights and things to look back at. And 100% I agree. It's like, oh man, what I wouldn't have given for the lottery balls to fall a little different, right? And everyone says what they want about it. A lot of people still to this day kind of think, well, I mean, ironic that the bankrupt franchise is getting Sidney Crosby and stuff. But regardless of if you think that the lottery is what it is, just a treat. Like 1,000 games of a guy that we've all had the absolute pleasure of being able to watch.
It's been unbelievable.
Yeah, like the Crosby-Ovechkin rivalry, so much fun.
We're very fortunate that we get to witness some of the greatest athletes in different sports. And I think of like Tom Brady, for example, because we hold in high regard the players that have played in earlier generations in any of the North American pro sports. You think of like Wayne Gretzky in hockey, you think of Michael Jordan in basketball. And then we kind of had
Tiger Woods.
We think of Tiger Woods.
Matt.
And then we kind of had that conversation around Tom Brady. Now we actually get to witness one of the greats in real time, Tom Brady being probably undisputably the greatest NFL quarterback of all time. Then now the conversation shifts. We've witnessed for the better part of 2 decades almost, one of the greatest NHL players of all time in Sidney Crosby.
And arguably the greatest goal scorer ever to live in Alex Ovechkin.
Yeah. I am one of the people that really hopes that he gets to that goal scoring target.
Oh, me too. Yeah. And like one thing to kind of piggyback just quick on the whiner thing that Crosby always carried around. A lot of star players are whiners. Like that's kind of just something that has always been a thing. Like Gretzky was a whiner. So like the best players, yeah, sometimes they'll whine. Every player can be kind of whiny. You're going to complain about stuff. It's bounces don't go your way, calls bad. Crosby did have a spout where he was, diving, flopping a little bit. Not as bad as people kind of make it out to be, but obviously magnified because of who he was.
I don't think that's what he'll be remembered for, though.
It's not. I haven't heard someone call Crosby a whiner in years now. He's not anymore. He just goes out there, gives it what he's got, which is still to this day top 10 center in the NHL easily. Like, good on the guy.
So with Crosby in his thousands game, I think we both agree that he's still got at least a few, if not more than a few years left in his career. We look at the players that are kind of taking that mantle now. And I say players because I don't think we think of 97 Connor McDavid as the new top talent of the NHL. And I think most people will agree with that. But there's another handful of players that are in that league MVP kind of conversation. Matthews is having an unreal season, and I'm sure you're absolutely loving it. 18 goals in 18 games.
Insane.
The other, like McKinnon, not quite the same stats, but still just an equally as effective player for his team. There is a lot of conversation about how there's a few players setting up. And again, I don't think we give defensemen as much credit as they deserve. It's always forwards in these conversations because they're the ones that put up points. But I think Cale Makar deserves to also be in this top 3 or 4 or 5 player conversation.
I think so. I think if he's not there now, like I would argue, if you're starting a hockey team tomorrow and you've got to pick guys, taking age and stuff into account, I think you have to if you are picking a team. I'll sound a little biased, but if I'm picking a team, I'm picking 97 first. That's my first pick. But Matthews is 2. And then Makar is possibly 3. He's insane. Like you hit it on the head, that the talent level coming up, and like McKinnon's not old by any means, he's 25 or something, but you watch these kids and it's insane. Matthews, McDavid, like there's a clear tier of guys that in any given season can win a Hart Trophy, an Art Ross, Rocket Richard. Like you're seeing that mantle. You're seeing the Ovechkin passing the goal scoring mantle to Matthews a little bit, and you're seeing the Crosby has at this point passed the Hart and Art Ross mantle over to McDavid. Because I'd agree, like if the voting ends today, McDavid is the Hart Trophy winner. He's got 37 points. 37 points. Like, how do you counter that? He's on pace for 104 points in 56 games.
No,
but then you look at the guys.
2 points a game. There. It's insane. But then, you look at
the guys that are at that. Like the NHL scoring leaders, you've got guys that have 30 points. Like Matthews and Marner have 30 and 29 points. I think Draisaitl has 29 points. Like that's insane. And defensemen too. Like it's kind of becoming normal again for defensemen to be up at like a point per game. Like Makar's a point per game. Quinn Hughes has 20 points. Darnell Nurse has 16, which is kind of weird for me. But I mean, he also has Connor McDavid on his team. Morgan Riley has 16, and he's not really having a great year. A weird one for me also, Drew Doughty has 15 points this year.
Trying to remind the fans of the league that Drew Doughty is still very much relevant defenseman in the league.
I mean, on a bad LA team, he's got 15 points in 16 games. Hedman's got 15 points. Tyson Barrie, hilariously enough, has 16. Like John Carlson. We've got a lot of guys here. Klingberg is a point per game right now. Jake Muzzin's 12 points in 19 games. There's a lot of defensemen who have a lot of points this year. 11 points for Shea Theodore. Like there's some pretty good point totals here for some of these defensemen. That's like, wow. The game has shifted so much towards you need to have some offense and some puck movement from your back end. It's so crucial in today's NHL. You don't need a team full of Dion Phaneufs anymore that are just going to pound your head off and hit you really hard, because if you can't skate and defend the way that you can skate and play offense, like if you don't have a transition game, you're going to get lost. But you're right, like these defensemen that are young still, or even some of the older guys, but the defensemen that are young still, like the Quinn Hughes of the world, the Cale Makars, there's a lot of really good talent down there on the blue line that they're young. They're in their early 20s. Like, this is the most talent, in my opinion, that has ever been in the league. Like, you look at it right now, and people maybe point out, oh, well, the Yzerman, Sakic years and stuff. And yeah, like, that's where I fell in love with hockey, was in the Yzerman, Sakic years, the back in the late 90s or early 90s, where you had all those guys who were still playing. Lemieux was still playing, Gretzky, like insane. But this new generation is just different.
I think there's two reasons to attribute for that. One is just the attraction to the game has grown so much, and because of that, in turn, the talent pool for hockey players has grown significantly.
Mm-hmm.
And then just the skill level of the athletes too. Modern training, modern coaching, modern play style has improved the skill levels generally of players across the board, even from the worst players to the best players. Players are just generally better. And so we get to witness more talent on a night in and night out basis. Of course, there's been some like rule changes to the games as well that have opened up and have allowed skilled players to shine a little bit more, I would say.
Yeah, like your fourth line isn't all face punchers anymore, right? Like they're a line that you need to be able to cycle in the offensive zone and chip in offense.
Yep. I will go back to this one bugs me, and some people will argue against me for it. I don't put Quinn Hughes in the same conversation as Cale Makar, and then maybe I'm biased as a Flame fan saying this, but Quinn Hughes to me is a forward moonlighting as a defenseman.
You know what? You're not incorrect. He has the worst advanced stats for defensemen in the entire league, and it's not like he is dead last. He is, again, that's partly because he's not great in his own end, and partly because that team is just not good in its own end at all. When you're regularly trotting out a guy like Tyler Myers for like top 4 minutes every night, you don't have a good blue line. But I 100% agree with you. I said Quinn Hughes more so as like he's an exciting young player. He is. But he's nowhere near Cale Makar. Like, not even close. He's a power play specialist.
Oh, there we go. Lost connection, but we're back.
All right, we're good. What was the last thing you heard me say?
I heard Quinn Hughes is an exciting young player, and then I lost you.
Okay. All I kind of made a point was exciting young player, and like the Canucks are lucky to have the guy. He's, you can teach defense, you really can, but kind of back to the not everyone's good at everything thing. But he's not even in the same. He's not in the same tier as Makar. Not even close.
I don't know if any defenseman is the same tier as Cale Makar, to be honest.
Victor Hedman. There's like that top tier of defensemen. Oh yeah, they're not obviously stylistically. They're nowhere near the same. But
yeah, okay.
Like Hedman still puts up a point per game. Like controls the flow. His effect on the game is so huge.
A little bit bigger,
Victor Hedman's a special player.
Yeah,
well, he's like honestly a better, less mean Chris Pronger. But seriously though, like similar size, like both had really good offensive abilities. Hedman is better offensively than I think Pronger ever really was. But sans the cross checks that Chris Pronger kind of normalized, there's some stylistic comparison there. But I think that Victor Hedman's the best Swedish defenseman to play the game since Lidstrom, and possibly the second best Swedish defenseman to play the game ever. Big praise for him. But I've watched a lot of Hedman over the years. I've watched a lot of Tampa Bay games because they're just such a fun team to watch. And he's there. I think Makar is, if he's not better now, he is going to be significantly better. But like he's probably the next guy I would go for, in my opinion, on D. Or yeah, Hedman for sure.
I think that maybe it's tough to make the case right now for a 21-year-old Cale Makar to be the best defenseman in the league, even though he is extremely talented, and that's nothing against him. It's just he's only been in the league for just over one season. But if he keeps this trajectory, a 24-year-old Cale Makar will be just a standout top defenseman in the league. Like
a 24-year-old Cale Makar could get 100 points.
Which is unreal for defensemen.
I don't use the 100-point plateau very often for players because it's so incredibly hard to do. But Cale Makar has a realistic chance to score multiple 100-point seasons as a defenseman and still be elite defensively. He's what Erik Karlsson should have been. Unbelievable. Like I know this just sounds like a Cale Makar love fest, but I mean, like, how do you not? Like, the guy's incredible.
Yeah. And
he has a chance to be the best defenseman we've ever seen play hockey. Like right now, and this goes with our point perfectly, is I know that's a huge expectation, and Bobby Orr fans are probably rolling, but this kid has a chance to transcend the game like Orr did. He's the McDavid of defense.
yeah.
And it's insane. Like, McDavid has a chance to be the best player ever. Now, he's not going to hit Gretzky's point totals because it's impossible. Their scoring will never go to that level again. Goalies are too good. Defensemen are too good. You'll never have that level of scoring again. Ovechkin, I hope, hits the goal number. But Crosby's got more assists than the second place player has points. That being said, there's different ways to look at it, but McDavid, just from a pure talent as a hockey player, could go down as the best player ever to play. Like, you have to, again, account for era adjusted. Like, back then, goals per game were way higher and stuff, but there's a chance. There's always a chance that it's hard for him, because it's going to be hard for him to be the best Edmonton Oiler ever, because, the 80s Oilers were the 80s Oilers. But it's fun. Like, we have a lot of these kids. Like, Makar could go down as the best defenseman ever, and Makar McKinnon could dethrone the Sakic's and Forsbergs of the world as the best Avalanche players ever. And there's a realistic possibility that they'll do it. Matthews, if he stays in Toronto, is going to be the best Leaf ever. And there's been some really good players, but, like, you look at it and you're like, you take a step back and you look at the league as a whole, and we're really, really spoiled with what we get to watch. Any given night, there's a superstar hockey player on TV.
Yep. I agree with that 100%. The talent distribution in the league, and I think a conversation we'll have for another day, is how that talent is spread throughout the league. We don't have to worry about these as much of these superstar teams. It's my one slight against the NBA. I love watching basketball, but my slight against the NBA is superstar teams, and that's not something you necessarily witness in the NHL. And that's exactly the benefit of it, is we get to witness a superstar player every single night on TV.
It's different in the NHL, right?
Two-thirds of teams have a star player. Heavy.
Oh, easily. Yeah. Easily 2/3. Like, I agree with the super team point. Like, it's kind of, I'm not a big basketball fan just to begin with, but it's something that turns me off of the sport. Is it's like, okay, yeah, we get to watch, like, when the Miami Heat did the bringing the 3 to South Beach thing, and, like, the hockey equivalent of that, like, realistically speaking, the last time we saw, like, 2 players go and sign together somewhere, because that's what happened, was, like, correct me if I'm wrong if this has happened more recently, but Parise and Suter.
That's the first thing that came to my mind, and it was not effective at all.
It backfired a little bit. Like, not to take anything away from those two, but, like, Suter at the time, I think, was a superstar defenseman, but Parise was, like, really, really good top liner. But that's the most recent I can think of. You could argue maybe the Tavares thing, but for him to go there and try and make a super team, but it's not a thing that happens really regularly in hockey, and it happens all the time in basketball. Like Gronk and Brady joining the Bucks and then winning a Super Bowl.
Yeah, and like the talent they attracted to also on the defensive side of the ball too.
Oh, what a complete team.
Yeah.
We called it, by the way. We were right.
Yeah.
But
yeah, that's a good thing. I don't know if we got the chance to mention that, but absolutely, we did call that.
No, we didn't do one the week after the Super Bowl. So yeah, no, we were right on that one. But yeah, no, it's the super team thing. Yeah, we'll add that to the list for the next one because that's a really good point to kind of talk about how the talent gets distributed through the NHL and how it's really obviously draft heavy and drafting and development plays such a huge role. But we'll get to that one. That's a really good talking point for next one.
All right, Kevin. Well, we're probably about an hour 15 into this conversation, so let's call it. And we got a few topics to bring on to next week's show. So thanks to the listeners for tuning in. He's Kevin. I'm Ryan. Follow us on Twitter at 2FU Podcast, and follow Kevin at KevWab or me at Ryan_Foisey on Twitter for the latest and greatest hot takes. And yeah, we'll see you soon.